Welcome to Biology 1003. I am your instructor, Dr. Jibo Zanzo, and let's get into it with Chapter 1, which gives us some introductory material, some background, and it's gonna lay the groundwork for what we're going to talk about this semester. Here are some learning objectives for Chapter 1. We're going to learn how to describe what it means to be alive. We're going to talk a little bit about how many different kinds of ways there are to be alive. We're going to define science and look at some different sources of scientific information. We will discern what's a theory, what is a hypothesis. We will look at the steps of the scientific method, and we will think about how science affects our daily lives. Okay, so that said, what is biology? Biology is the science of life. That's it. It's the science of life. So that, I guess we're doing that again. So this begs two questions. What is science? And what is life? So we're going to tackle that first question second, about what science is, and we're going to go after what is life first. So living things display 7 qualities. They are organized. They display order. They are capable of self-regulation. They can process energy. They can convert energy from one form into another form. Like they can take the chemical energy stored in our food and turn it into the energy of motion, kinetic energy. Or I can turn the food that I ate into sound energy that I'm using to give you this lecture. Living things grow and develop. Living things are capable of reproduction. Living things respond to the environment that they live in. And living things are capable of adapting to their environment through natural selection. So, order and organization are two things that are evident in all living things. You can see here in this picture, in this ecosystem in Africa, a number of different plant species that show some elaborate geometry. And all living things have patterns to them, and we're going to focus on a couple of those patterns that we can observe in living things. So here's our focus on organization. We're going to look at the organization of living things in a number of different ways, but let's focus on how we can zoom in on very small parts of our biosphere first. So one way that we can make a hierarchy or a sort of a pecking order of biological organization is by zooming in from the most inclusive, looking at all living things on Earth, down to the tiniest level, the atomic level. So the biosphere is defined as all of the life on Earth. Every living thing, from bacteria to plants, animals, fungi, fish in the sea, birds in the air, all of it comprises the biosphere. And we find that from the top of our atmosphere just into to the depths of the oceans. But as far as we know, life doesn't extend too far down through the Earth's crust. But there's a lot of living stuff out there, and all of that together comprises what we call the biosphere, the sphere of life. The biosphere, in turn, can be broken down into different types of ecosystems. Ecosystems are rather large landscape scale areas that include a lot of different species that are working together, living together, uh, like a temperate forest or the Sahara Desert or uh, a deep ocean. These are all different types of ecosystems where we find certain patterns in how organisms have adapted to live in those environments. Within an ecosystem, we find different smaller communities, which are smaller subsets of different groups of species, like, for example, these water lilies that are growing with other aquatic plants, and there's fish and other smaller organisms living together in this community within the ecosystem. Within a community, we find that within a certain species, there are populations. Now, a population is defined as all the members of a given species that are living together and have the potential to interact, maybe reproduce with each other. So in this case, we're looking at a bunch of different, or actually copied and pasted, Daphnia, which are also called water fleas, which are something that you're going to see in the lab. And these are typically found in pond ecosystems, and they are frequently very abundant. If we look at an individual water flea, an individual Daphnia, that comprises an organism. If we were to look at the finer scale, at what makes up an individual of Daphnia, we would see that they have different organs and organ systems. They have a digestive system, they have a circulatory system, they have muscles that help them to swim through the water. They have sensory organs like compound eyes, like you can see in the picture here. And each of those organs and organ systems is made up of different types of tissue. Tissue is a group of cells that have the same purpose or function. Speaking of cells, tissues are made up of different types of cells. And a cell is the simplest unit of a living organism that can still be considered to be alive all on its own. So there are organisms that are single-celled, where the cell is the organism. You and I and Daphnia the water flea and a lot of other organisms are multicellular, made up of many cells of different types working together towards a common function. But cells are very important. All living things, as we know of them, are made up of cells. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about cells and cell functions this semester. Inside the cells, they have structures that have different functions, little parts that enable the cell to work properly, and those are called organelles. An organelle just means little organs. And in one of our chapters, we're going to focus on the different organelles and their functions inside the cell. But just a little sneak preview, I'm going to show you a zoomed-in picture of one organelle called the mitochondria. As you may have heard, the powerhouse of the cell. An organelle, like a mitochondrion, is made up of molecules. And the molecules have adapted for different functions. We can look at ATP synthase particles, for example, as one type of molecule. Here is an ATP synthase molecule zoomed in. As you can see, it's made out of lots and lots of little parts in turn, and those little parts are individual atoms. So molecules are comprised of atoms. Atoms work together, and the different arrangement of atoms in a molecule lead to different functions that we can observe at all the different scales that we just mentioned, from the biosphere through the cell and even in the organellar level. Okay, so that's one way that we see organization in life, in these nested ecosystems, communities, populations, so on and so forth. Another way that life is organized is in its classification. So we can look at any living organism and we can classify it into a group or a taxon. More than one taxon is called, they're called taxa, in a nested hierarchy, kind of like a set of nesting boxes or matryoshka dolls, like I have a picture of right here. So what does that mean? Well, let's take, for example, a red fox. A red fox is of the species Vulpes vulpes. Now, a red fox is like other foxes, gray foxes and other types of foxes, in the same, what we call, genus. Different types of foxes are closely related to other organisms, especially dogs, in the family Canidae. So dogs, dingoes, wolves, these are all members of that family Canidae. Dogs are related to other types of meat-eating animals in the order Carnivora. That includes cats and bears and whales and seals. Sorry, not whales, but seals, sea lions, dogs, cats, raccoons, skunks. Those are all in the order Carnivora. But whales are in the same class as the carnivores, the Mammalia. Mammalia all have certain characteristics, like, for example, hair. Mammals, in the class Mammalia, are related to other organisms that have backbones at the phylum level, the chordata. So that includes things like fish and birds, but not things like starfish or jellyfish or things like that. But starfish and jellyfish and all the different kinds of worms and things, these are all different types of animals at the kingdom level. And then animals are related to things like fungi and plants in having cells that have nuclei at the domain level. Okay, so another way to think of all of this nested hierarchy of diversity is it's kind of like this. Look over on the left side of the image and you'll see that the domain is analogous to the planet that we live on. We all live on Earth. And on the planet Earth is divided up into different countries. And a country like the United States of America is further subdivided into different states. Each state is made up of different counties. Counties are divided up by cities. Within a city, you might have a particular street that you live on. And then on that street, your house has a particular number. And the number of your house indicates where you may be found with you and whomever you may live with. Now, you might live in a particular country, and all of those countries are found on the same planet. So it's not like Alabama or the United States is going to be found on Mars. The more you zoom in from the planet level to the house level, the more exclusive you become. There are fewer species of foxes than there are genera or groups of more than one genus in the family of canids or dogs. So a family can't belong to more than one order or class or phylum, just like an organism can't belong to more than one species. If you are of a certain species, that's it. That's the species you belong to. Okay, so as I said, every organism that is alive that we know of can be put into these 8 different levels of organization. So here I've got a picture of a table showing the different levels. On the left-hand side, you can see domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And then across the top, you can see I've got 4 different representatives of eukaryotes, or organisms that have cells made up of organisms that have cells with nuclei. And you can see pictures of what these organisms are at the bottom. We've got a tiger and a lion, a golden eagle, and a human. Now, you can see at the kingdom level, we are all the same. We are all animals. And even at the phylum level, we are all the same, and that we are all chordates. At the class level, we start to see a little bit of variability. Lions and tigers and humans are all mammals, whereas the golden eagle is a bird in the class Aves. If we look at the order level, we can see that the lion and the tiger are both in the carnivora, while humans are in the order of primates. And even at the family and genus level, lions and tigers are the same. They're felids, or cats, in the genus Panthera, while humans are in a different family and a different genus. Tigers are of the species Panthera tigris. Lions are of the species Panthera leo. Humans are of the species Homo sapiens. And the golden eagle is of the species Aquila chrysidos. So we can take this table and arrange the data into a different type of representation. This is called a dendrogram. And we can use those taxonomic groupings, the species, the phyla, the genera, all of those, to help us understand what we think was the evolutionary history of the groups of organisms that these living things belong to. And we can see what's happening in this dendrogram is the more closely related two things are, the more close the branching. So, for example, you can see that the lion and the tiger, Panthera tigris and Panthera leo, are very closely related to each other. They are more closely connected on the right-hand side of the image. And seeing as lions and tigers and humans are all mammals, we can see that they're more closely related to each other. If you move to that next branching point a little bit further to the left, then either of us are to the golden eagle. If you keep moving to the left, you'll see that we all share common ancestry with the eagle, in that we are all vertebrates. We all have backbones. So all organisms are related to each other at some level or another. So you can't say that something is totally unrelated to something else. We consider that all living things share, at some date in the ancient past, common ancestry. All right, so speaking of all living things, we can take all living things that we know of and divide them into the three domains. You can remember those domains were analogous to planets. We've got three of them at this broadest level: the bacteria, the archaea, and the eukarya. So the bacteria and the archaea are two types of single-celled organisms that have cells with no nuclei. They look similar to each other. We can only see them through a microscope, but they are fundamentally very different. And it took us a very long time from the dawn of microscopy back in the 18th century until the 20th century to realize how very different these different groups of organisms are. And we'll talk a little bit about those differences later on. But the third domain of life includes pretty much all the stuff that you are most familiar with on a daily basis. This is the eukarya. These are organisms whose cells have nuclei. And if you're not quite clear on what that means, we'll get to that over the course of the semester. Most biologists consider that there are at least 4 different kingdoms within the eukarya. So plants in the kingdom Plantae, and fungi, mushrooms and molds and yeast and things like that, and animals are all very good, well-recognized kingdoms. We know that something is either a plant, or it's not, or it's a fungus, or it's not, or it's an animal, or it's not. The fourth one on here, the protist, is a very broad and diverse group, which includes basically all eukaryotic organisms that are not plants, fungi, or animals. So it's a little bit much to go into, but we can just kind of use protist as a descriptive term, even though it's not a very good taxonomic term. And it's not something I want to get into right now. But it's just kind of things that are not bacteria or archaea or plants, animals, or fungi. And most of them are single-celled organisms where the cells have nuclei. Okay, moving on to the other things that make living things alive. That was all about regulation, and I promise all of these other characteristics of living organisms won't be as in-depth and in detail, but just kind of have to get those things out of the way. Self-regulation is a quality of living things, and what we can see here in this picture, these are cells of a plant, and those little spherical looking things that are kind of moving around, those are chloroplasts. And those are the organelles that help these plant cells to capture sunlight, sun energy, and turn it into chemical energy. So inside these cells, these chloroplasts are being moved to optimally photosynthesize or collect solar energy. So that's one example of self-regulation. Energy processing. That is turning energy from one form into another form. Let me click on this and we can see here's a hummingbird that is drinking nectar from a flower. Now, the flower is growing on a plant that is photosynthesizing, turning solar energy into chemical energy in the form of sugar in the nectar that the hummingbird is drinking. The hummingbird is in turn taking that energy from the sugar in the nectar and turning it into kinetic energy. It's flapping its wings. It's sensing how much nectar is left in the bottom of the blossom, and all of these things. So that's all different forms of energy processing. Growth and development. Living things tend to grow and develop through time. So here is an acorn. We'll click on that and see what happens to the acorn. Boop, it sprouts and starts growing into a new oak tree. So that oak seedling started from a single cell inside the acorn, which developed into an embryonic plant, which then, through growth, cell division, ended up being a much larger multicellular organism. So growth and development. Reproduction. So living things don't live forever, except in as much as they are capable of reproduction. So we can see here are some bacteria that start off as just a couple of cells, and through cell division, they end up being many more cells. So for single-celled organisms, once you divide your cells from one cell into two cells, you've doubled your number. Response to the environment. So besides being able to regulate things internally inside the cells and inside the organisms, living things have to respond to what's going on outside of them. We can see here that there's a little rodent that's going to hop along, and whoa, Nelly! You can see how that snake came right out at it and it had to jump to get out of the way. That rodent is responding to its environment. And in this case, the environment includes other organisms that are trying to prey upon it. And evolutionary adaptation is the last of our qualities of living organisms. What we can see in this image here is some renderings of different types of fossils from the ancient past. You can see we're looking back on the order of 385 million years ago. If you look at the bottom left of this image, up until about 360 million years ago. And these pictures of things that have long, complicated names like Eusthenopteron, Panderichthyes, Tiktaalik, Ichthyostega, Acanthostega, and Coelacanth. These are all organisms that we have found through the fossil record. And what you're looking at here is different transitional forms from purely aquatic organisms that lived in rivers, swamps, and shallow areas to living on land. Tiktaalik was an important transitional fossil that was found that apparently lived in the water, but also had limbs that enabled it to come up on land as well. Very well adapted for having this amphibious or land and aquatic lifestyle. So, to repeat, living things display 7 qualities. They are order and organization, self-regulation, energy processing, growth and development, reproduction, response to the environment, and evolutionary adaptation. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to get into the second question: what is science?